The air in Indiana has felt different for weeks, heavy with expectation, buzzing with anticipation. Fever fans have been counting down the days, watching every update, scanning every sideline shot, and dissecting every training clip for one thing: signs that Caitlin Clark was ready to return. And now, with her comeback on the horizon, the conversation has shifted from when will she be back to what will she look like when she is? If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe. Her absence hasn't been quiet. Every game she's missed has been a test. For the team, for the coaching staff, and for the narrative around her. When she went down, some critics wasted no time jumping in with the hot take of the summer. Maybe the Fever are better without Clark. It was a kind of soundbite designed to spark debate, and it did. Sports talk panels ran with it. Social media argued over it. And every Fever game became an unspoken referendum on whether that theory held any weight. But Coach Stephanie White wasn't having it. In her most recent press availability, she didn't just brush off those claims. She dismantled them. She reminded everyone that stats don't lie. In the games without Caitlin, turnovers spiked, offensive efficiency dipped, and the team's half-court spacing collapsed under pressure. When she's out there, she changes the geometry of the game, White said, leaning into the mic like she wanted the point to land. It's not just about her points. It's about the way everyone else can breathe a little easier on the court. That's the thing about Clark. Yes, she can score in bursts that feel almost unfair, but her greatest strength might be the gravitational pull she exerts on defenses. Opponents can't afford to leave her alone for even a second, and that opens up lanes, passing angles, and scoring chances for the rest of the roster. Without her, the Fever have had to grind harder for every bucket, leaning heavily on isolation plays and post-ups. It's worked in spurts, but as White admitted, it's not sustainable for a deep playoff run. So when Caitlin returns, which White hinted could be any day now, it won't be to the exact same role she left. In her absence, the Fever's chemistry evolved. Aaliyah Boston has asserted herself as a nightly double-double machine. Kelsey Mitchell has shouldered primary scoring duties, and the bench has learned to scrap for points in ways that weren't necessary before. That growth is something White wants to protect, not roll back. That's why she dropped the most intriguing piece of news yet. Caitlin's new role will be bigger, more layered, and more deliberate. We're not just plugging her back into the same sets, White explained. We're expanding what she does, giving her more responsibility as a playmaker, asking her to initiate more offense, and trusting her with some defensive matchups we weren't before. It's a calculated move. The Fever have learned how to win without over-relying on her scoring. So now the plan is to blend that balanced attack with her elite court vision and passing. Think less Caitlin takes every big shot, and more Caitlin orchestrates the offense so everyone gets the best shot. For a player who already thrives on making her teammates better, it's a natural evolution. White also hinted at a shift in tempo. In the games without Clark, Indiana's pace slowed, partly to protect possessions without their best ball handler, partly out of necessity with fewer transition opportunities. With her back, expect the Fever to run more. Clark's ability to push the ball up court in 2 or 3 dribbles changes the way defenses have to prepare. Aaliyah Boston sprinting into early post position. Kelsey Mitchell streaking to the corner for a quick 3. It's the kind of rhythm that can bury opponents before they even get their footing. Of course, the physical side of her return can't be ignored. White was careful to note that the team isn't rushing her back. The groin injury that sidelined Clark demanded patience, and the coaching staff has been deliberate about letting her fully heal. White's philosophy is simple. We'd rather have her at 100% for the stretch run than 80% for a few extra games. It's a statement of trust in Caitlin, in the team's current momentum, and in the bigger picture of their playoff push. That bigger picture is where things get really interesting. Before Clark's injury, the Fever were hovering in that frustrating space between potential and execution, flashes of brilliance followed by stretches of inconsistency. Since then, they've learned how to grind out wins, even when the offense isn't clicking. Now, with her return, they have a chance to merge resilience with firepower. That's the kind of formula that can turn a fringe playoff team into a dangerous contender. There's also the emotional lift to consider. Teammates like Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hull have spoken openly about what Clark brings to the locker room: an edge, a confidence, and a belief that no deficit is too big to overcome. It's not just the fans who feed off her energy. It's the players sharing the floor with her. You can't quantify that in a box score, but anyone who's played competitive sports knows it's real. White's praise for Clark went beyond tactics and strategy. She talked about her work ethic during rehab, how she stayed engaged in film sessions, and how she used the time away from the court to become an even better student of the game. When you see a player with that much natural talent also put in the mental work, you know you've got something special, White said. Still, the return won't be without challenges. Integrating a star player back into a team that's been winning without her is always a balancing act. Roles shift, shot distribution changes, and opponents will be watching closely for any signs of rust or disconnection. White knows that the first few games might not be seamless, but she's betting that the long-term gains will outweigh any short-term growing pains. The timeline she gave, somewhere between August 17th and 20th, has fans marking their calendars, buying tickets, and speculating about which matchup will mark the official return. Whenever it happens, it's clear the Fever plan to make a statement. This isn't just about plugging Caitlin Clark back into the lineup. It's about unveiling a stronger, smarter version of the team, one that has learned to win in multiple ways, and is ready to test that versatility against the league's best. And make no mistake, the rest of the WNBA has noticed. Teams that were starting to feel comfortable in their playoff positioning are subtly eyeing the standings a little more nervously. A healthy Clark, empowered with a bigger role, and surrounded by a team that's grown in her absence, is a dangerous combination. It's the kind of mid-season shift that can completely change the postseason picture. For now, Indiana is keeping its focus tight. White's mantra to the team has been simple: steady progress, one game at a time. But between the lines, you can hear the excitement. The Fever know they're about to get their centerpiece back, and this time, she's coming with an even bigger impact in mind. Caitlin Clark's return isn't just a roster update. It's a pivot point in the season, the kind of moment that can completely alter the rhythm of a league. The WNBA isn't built for static narratives. It's built on momentum. And right now, Indiana has a very real chance to ride this wave all the way into late September. For weeks, the Fever have been surviving with a patchwork identity. They've been the team that scrapes for loose balls, pushes just enough transition offense to keep games close, and relies heavily on Boston's inside dominance. It's worked, but survival basketball isn't sustainable when you're trying to win in the playoffs. That's where Clark changes everything. She brings inevitability. That's a rare quality in basketball, and it doesn't come from being a good shooter or an elite passer. It comes from being that player everyone knows will find a way to break open a game. When she's on the floor, opponents don't just play against her. They brace for her. The fourth quarter feels different. Possessions carry more tension, and suddenly that 8-point lead doesn't feel safe. White knows this, and that's why she's been so vocal about Clark's impact. She isn't just telling the media how important Clark is. She's telling her own team. She's reminding them that this isn't a return to normal situation. This is an upgrade, a step into a new phase of their season. But upgrades aren't automatic. They require reconfiguration. Let's talk about the on-court mechanics first. In Clark's absence, the Fever offense has had to run through Mitchell and Boston almost exclusively. That's meant more predictable sets, slower possessions, and more grinding for every bucket. With Clark back, those same plays become weapons again. Imagine a high pick and roll with Boston. Before, the defense could commit 2 defenders to Boston on the roll. Now, if they do that, Clark's pulling up from 28 feet without hesitation. And here's the subtle genius in White's approach. She's not trying to make Clark the savior on every possession. She's talked about using her as a decoy in stretches, pulling defenders out of position just by moving without the ball. That's how you preserve her legs for crunch time. Let her spend the second quarter bending the defense, then unleash her in the final 5 minutes when the game is tight. Defensively, there's also a strategic shift in play. Clark isn't known for being an elite stopper. But she's smart, and smart defenders are dangerous in the right schemes. White's hinted at putting her on secondary ball handlers, which sounds small but has big ripple effects. It frees up Mitchell to chase shooters, lets Hull guard a position, and keeps Boston fresher for rebounding battles instead of switching on to guards every possession. But there's another layer to all of this, the locker room chemistry. When a star player comes back from injury, there's always a risk of disrupting what's been working. Teammates who've stepped up might feel their touches slipping away. Players who found rhythm might lose it adjusting to a different style of play. That's why White's decision to give Clark more responsibility as a facilitator is so important. It keeps her teammate involved, reassures them that their growth isn't being erased, and ensures that the offense doesn't shrink back into a one-player show. The mental lift can't be overstated, either. The Fever have been grinding, traveling, battling through tight games, and carrying the weight of expectations without their star. Getting her back isn't just about points. It's about having the confidence that comes from knowing one of the best players in the sport is on your side again. And for Clark herself, this is a test of adaptability. The version of the Fever she's stepping back into is sharper, tougher, and more balanced than the one she left. That means she's not returning to her team. She's joining this team, the one that's been forged in her absence. How quickly she can sync up with that version will define how far they can go. White's vision is clear. She wants Clark to be the heartbeat, but she doesn't want the entire organism dependent on that one beat. She wants a team that can attack from every angle, where Clark's shooting is deadly, but her passing is just as feared, and her leadership keeps everyone locked in when the game gets messy. Let's project forward. Say Clark returns in mid-August, as hinted. The Fever have roughly a dozen games left to lock in their playoff position. Realistically, they need to win at least 8 of those to secure a strong seed. That means immediate chemistry, immediate results. The margin for a rust period is slim. This is where the Fever's current rhythm could be an advantage. They've learned how to win ugly. They've learned how to grind out a one-possession game without Clark bailing them out. Now, with her back, they don't need her to be perfect every night. She can afford an off-shooting night, because this team knows how to win in other ways. And if she's on, if she comes back firing, hitting threes, finding open teammates, pushing the tempo, then Indiana instantly becomes the most dangerous lower seed in the bracket. Teams at the top won't want to face them in a short series, because they know what Clark can do when the lights are brightest. But here's the other side of the coin. Every team in the league has been watching her recovery. They had weeks to prepare for her return, to scout her tendencies from earlier in the season, to plan ways to frustrate her. She's going to see physical defense, double teams, and schemes designed to test her conditioning. That's why White's insistence on a diversified offense matters so much. If teams throw everything at Clark, Indiana can punish them elsewhere. There's also the media storm to manage. Clark's return will dominate headlines. Every performance, good or bad, will be dissected, debated, and turned into a talking point. That's pressure, but it's also fuel. Clark's shown she thrives in big moments. Now she gets to prove she can handle the long stretch of them that come with the playoff chase. By the time the Fever hit their final 3 games, the playoff picture will be almost set. If White's plan works, Clark will be fully integrated, the offense will be humming, and Indiana will be peaking at just the right time. That's when the role she's being groomed for, not just scorer, not just passer, but connector, will pay off most. Because the truth is, playoff basketball isn't about the best individual. It's about the best connected team. And for all the highlight reels and scoring runs, Clark's greatest weapon might be her ability to connect, to make everyone on the floor better just by the way she sees the game. That's what Stephanie White is betting on. That's why she's so confident, so certain in her praise. This isn't a gamble on talent. It's a calculated move based on knowing exactly what kind of player and person she has. If it all clicks, the Fever won't just be back in the playoffs. They'll be in position to do real damage. And for a franchise still building its modern identity, that could be the kind of breakthrough that changes everything. The moment Caitlin Clark steps back onto the hardwood in an Indiana Fever jersey, it's going to feel less like a routine substitution and more like the opening scene of a new chapter. Not just for her, not just for Fever, but for the WNBA as a whole. It's the kind of moment that has been quietly building for weeks, the tension wound tight by every injury update, every training clip, every subtle hint dropped by Stephanie White. What's fascinating about White's approach to Clark's return is how layered it is. On the surface, you'd expect a coach to be eager to put the ball back in the hands of her most marketable and most talented player. But White's vision isn't about putting Clark back into the exact role she left. It's about creating a new version of the Fever, one that takes everything they've learned without her and fuses it with everything she does best. This is why Clark's impact on spacing is such a huge talking point. Defenses naturally extend themselves the moment she crosses half court, because her shooting range isn't just deep, it's absurd. A single step over the logo, and she's a threat. That extra 2 or 3 feet of defensive pressure changes the angles for passing, opens lanes for Boston to post up without help defenders swarming her, and forces opponents to choose between covering the paint or guarding the arc. Either choice plays directly into Indiana's hands. In the games without Clark, you could see opponents daring the Fever to beat them from the outside. And while players like Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hull stepped up admirably, it still allowed defenses to clog the middle. With Clark back, that strategy becomes impossible. It's like adding a queen to the chessboard after playing half the game without her. But here's where it gets really intriguing. White isn't just talking about offense. She's in it more than once that Clark's defensive assignments will expand. This isn't about turning her into a lockdown defender overnight. It's about using her instincts, anticipation, and speed to create chaos. Put her on a secondary ball handler, let her disrupt passing lanes, and suddenly you've got more opportunities to push in transition, where she's lethal. And make no mistake, transition basketball is where Indiana can become devastating. Clark is one of the few players who can grab a rebound, look up, and thread a perfect 50-foot pass in one motion. Imagine the Fever getting 4 or 5 of those looks a game. That's a swing of 8 to 10 points. And in the WNBA's tight margins, that's often the difference between winning and losing. Another element worth noting is the psychological warfare her presence brings. It's not just that fans in opposing arenas come to see her. It's that her reputation precedes her to the point where defenders overthink. Close out too aggressively? She drives past you. Sag off too far? She buries the 3. Double team her? She finds the open shooter. Without hesitation. That mental pressure wears on teams over the course of a game, and by the fourth quarter, mistakes happen. White knows all of this, which is why she's been so insistent that the Fever are better with Clark than without her, regardless of what critics might say. She's not relying on highlight reels or marketability to make that argument. She's looking at the numbers. Turnovers down, shot quality up, opponent field goal percentage lower when she's on the court. These are tangible, measurable impacts. Now, here's where things get complicated and exciting. Integrating a star back into a team that's been winning without them isn't always smooth. Roles shift, minutes change, and egos can get bruised. But in this case, the Fever's young core seems to understand the bigger picture. Boston's still going to be the dominant force inside. Mitchell will still get her isolation opportunities. Cunningham will still get her spot-up shots. The difference is, now they'll all be easier. Clark, for her part, has shown she's willing to adapt. She doesn't have to score 25 every night to feel impactful. She just has to control the game. And that's what the best point guards in history have done. Dictated the flow, decided when to push and when to slow, when to shoot and when to set the table. So let's project this forward. The playoff race in the WNBA is notoriously close. A team can move from the 6th seed to the 3rd in the space of a week. If Clark comes back mid-August and the Fever catch fire, they could easily jump up into a position where they're not just scraping into the postseason, but actually hosting a series. That's a completely different pressure for opponents. Coming into a packed Indiana arena, where Clark has a crowd eating out of her hand from the opening tip. Imagine the first playoff game back in Indiana with Clark in the lineup. The place would be electric. The Fever would have Boston dominating inside, Mitchell slicing up defenses on the perimeter, and Clark pulling the strings in between. It's the kind of balance most teams dream of having, and it's exactly what White has been quietly building toward all season. And here's another angle. The WNBA itself benefits massively from Clark's return. Ratings, ticket sales, social media engagement. They all spike when she's on the floor. That's not speculation. It's been proven since her first game. So the league is watching this comeback as closely as the Fever are. The deeper Indiana goes in the playoffs, the more eyes are on every game, the more sponsors stay invested, and the more the momentum builds going into the next season.